Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Valero Texas Open Data Dive Show. Got a good show for you all lined up this evening. A lot to look at. Don't want to waste any time, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It is simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I did post some research today to both places. I remembered to do that over to Instagram, thanks to the 140 character limit, or at least I haven't figured out the whole rolling thing or threading in Twitter. I don't know. Anyway, I wasn't able to say who or how many the players fit the criteria. There are three based on the criteria I put forward over at Twitter, and then I expanded on that over at Instagram. So if you want to see the three players, give me a follow over at Instagram. But if you want to have a fun little game, go onto Twitter, see if you can't guess who the three players are in the field this week that satisfy all of the criteria I put forward with the research that I found today. So that is where my research is posted. If you want to see that week after week, give me a follow at those two places. Also important, coming up with baseball starting Thursday, I will be posting some research to both of those places as well. So if you want to see research throughout the weeks, then give me a follow at those two places. Twitter is also where I put my betting cards week after week for the PGA season. So if you want to see my weekly betting card, give me a follow over at Twitter. And the link to my Twitch channel is also below. This is where I do all of my in-depth research. I did not have a stream this morning. I had a couple of phone calls I needed to make that needed to happen. But tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, I will be live over on Twitch doing a whole lot of the research. Tuesdays is generally when I make my mixed condition model, so I will be bringing you all in, or behind the curtain, if you will, on my process to making a mixed condition model. I'll be looking at some deep dive stats to finalize that, see which players I might be focusing on for DFS, all of that, and I'll be doing some baseball as well over on Twitch tomorrow. So if you want to see all of the in-depth research that I do, it's a much more laid-back stream, music going in the background. You will occasionally find me eating either breakfast or lunch, such as the way it is. But if you are interested in seeing all of that, give me a follow over at Twitch. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. Have you all made any wagers? I certainly threw in some wagers today around some of the players that qualified under the aforementioned criteria that I put forward. So have you made any wagers? Do you have any leans early on for DFS this week? All of that good stuff. And then how are your brackets doing for March Madness with the Final Four? Do you have any hope in your bracket pool that you entered? I have a spicy little win wager still alive, so looking forward to that this weekend as well. But we're here for the Valero Texas Open, so let's do that. Let's dig into the data for the 2023 Valero Texas Open. And we're going to start this evening over at Windfinder. The wind is generally a factor here at TPC San Antonio, the Oaks course. And before I get too much further into it, the last I have seen, there have been 4 field changes. Andrew Novak, Stefan Jaeger, Keith Mitchell, and Anders Albertson have withdrawn. You've also gotten the Monday qualifiers listed. I don't have that list, or didn't write it down, but I wanted to make sure for your information, the 4 players that have taken their name out of the field this week: Andrew Novak, Stefan Jaeger, Keith Mitchell, and Anders Albertson. Anyway, we move to Windfinder here, and you can see that as per usual here at the Oaks course, the wind is going to be a pretty big factor. Wind gusts into the 20s on Thursday. Does look a little bit more calm for Saturday. Now, Friday looks just chaos, sometimes gusts into the 30s. But the wind does switch a little bit, going from, say, east to west cardinality all the way to south to north cardinality, and then it switches overnight to change for the Saturday morning round. So we'll be updating this throughout the week, and I will have this for you Wednesday evening for the DFS Tactics show. But wind, generally a factor here, going to be again this week. So I wanted to bring your attention to the at least early forecast for San Antonio. So we're going to close that out, move on over to Fantasy National, and I am going to go ahead and expand this timeline to the beginning of 2022 so we have enough rounds. But as a natural segue, we're going to look at some moderate and windy conditions and your top players in the past 15 months or since the start of 2022 in the field this week. Chris Kirk, Hideki, Corey Connors, Scott Piercy, Alex Noren, Adam Long, Terrell Hatton, Emiliano Grillo, Cameron Percy, and Alex Smalley. Again, Keith Mitchell has withdrawn. So there's a look at your top wind performers that are in the field this week as of now, going back to the beginning of 2022. While I have this same filter or timeline filter on the beginning of 2022, something else we can look at, long courses. TPC San Antonio, the Oaks course measures to over 7,400 yards. Now, it can come under that threshold when they move tees, pins and stuff around, but generally speaking, it is a long course. So, in that same time frame, since the beginning of 2022, your top performers on long courses: Sam Stevens, coming off a very successful Corrales last week; Nate Lashley, Matthias Schwab, Akshay Bhatia, Nicholas Echeverria, your winner in Puerto Rico, another long course this season; Michael Kim, Harry Hall, Kevin Chappell, Thomas Detry, and Corey Connors, a former champion here at the Valero. So good stuff here. Lots of overlap for a lot of these players on long courses. Again, Sam Stevens had played very, very well down at the Corrales last week. A lot of these players I was very high on: Michael Kim, Harry Hall, around that long course narrative, Kevin Chappell, Detry, all of that. So there's a look at a couple of kind of overarching filters that we will be looking at throughout the evening. I am going to bring this timeline into the beginning of 2023 now. Nothing to do with scoring, as the course has gotten a little bit more difficult over the past couple of years. Now in 2019, it played completely easy. 2018 was average, but it was easy all before then, as you can see there. So it has gotten a little bit more difficult in recent years. So I don't want to do anything with scoring. Instead, I'm just going to take a broad look since the beginning of this calendar year, who's been playing well at a couple of metrics. So your top strokes gained approach players since the start of this calendar year have been Terrell Hatton, Kevin Roy, Ricky Fowler, Scott Piercy, Chris Kirk, Matt Wallace, Ben Martin, Sepp Straka, Satoshi Kodaira, Eric Cole, and Ryan Palmer. I also want to look at some off the tee. We noticed or investigated this last night in terms of strokes gained by shot type, that for the top 10s off the tee and around the green were fairly similar, but as you moved up the leaderboard, off the tee started to gain a lot of precedence over around the green. So your top strokes gained off the tee players in the field this week since the beginning of this calendar year: Luke List, Hayden Buckley, Terrell Hatton, Tyler Duncan, Corey Connors, MJ Duffy, Davis Thompson, Cameron Davis, Carson Young, Aaron Rye, and Dylan Wu. I skipped Keith Mitchell, He is withdrawn. Skipping Stefan Jaeger, he has withdrawn. So there's a look at the 2 ball striking categories for this week and who has played or been the best at those since the beginning of this calendar year. I am going to bring this all the way back to 2021. It's going to take me a moment, but I am going to grab all of the rounds from POA Trivialis courses. So that would be Innisbrook. And Fantasy National's having a little bit of a hard time. Oh, there it goes. So we want, gosh dang it, I knew that would happen. So we need Innisbrook. We need the Stadium course, which is the Amex. That. We are going to grab TPC San Antonio, of course here, TPC Sawgrass, which is the Players Championship, and TPC Scottsdale, the Waste Management. Those are the 5 courses that have POA Trivialis overseed. When the PGA Tour arrives, that means the Bermuda is dormant, and this POA Trivialis is the main grass type or surface to consider for putting. So since the beginning of 2021, your top putters in the field this week on this surface, and again, we are including San Antonio in this sample, your top putters have been Chesson Hadley, Taylor Montgomery, Terrell Hatton, Kramer Hickok, Matt Kuchar, Chad Ramey, Brendan Todd, Troy Merritt, Ben Griffin, and Patton Kazire. So there's your top 10 putters on POA Trivialis since the start of 2021. And you can see there are a varying amount of rounds from players. Taylor Montgomery just on the PGA Tour, but already has shown his putting prowess, one of the best on tour already. Very few rounds, but I would be comfortable saying that this is probably an accurate representation given his putting, at least early on in his career, his putting prowess. Brendan Todd, always a very good putter, but has been very good on this surface. Troy Merritt, Kuchar, and his performance at match play, which is also POA Trivialis. We just don't get those putting statistics, at least in Fantasy National. So Matt Kuchar, Terrell Hatton, who's generally played the match play very well as well. Not so much this year, much to my chagrin, but very good putter. Siwoo Kim down here in the top 20. Alex Norn, again, another player that generally plays well at the match play. So you can see the top putters on this surface since the start of 2021. Wanted to make sure I showed you that information for your research and your purposes to use throughout this week. But with that, that is about all that I am wanting to do in terms of a strokes gained view. Let's go ahead and jump straight into some of these prior leaderboards. There are a lot of metrics that I would like to figure out what we want to focus on. So I need to bring this back to all courses, and I'm just going to get this prepared for long courses, since San Antonio is a long course, or the Oaks course is a long course. So I'm going to get this set for long courses. Now, we might not use the long course filter on all of these metrics by the time the mixed condition model rolls around, but at least early on in our research, we can take a look at some of these things. So we'll take a look at last year's leaderboard, and we can take a quick look at strokes gained. Let's just do the top 17 here just for ties. You see only a couple of players, 3 in fact, that are negative in terms of strokes gained approach. One pretty darn close to field average, just a -0.5. Hostler was not very good with his irons last year, but you see he made it up in putting. Only 3 players negative in terms of putting. and only one of them was, or one of those three was very close to field average as well. If we sort on each of these, off the tee, I was going to say fairly solid. I think that's a bit of an overstatement. You got a lot of middling finishes here and a missed cut, but your winner, J.J. Spawn, fairly high up in off the tee. Strokes gained approach, you got a lot of your cut makers, and your winner, J.J. Spawn, a little bit further down here in terms of approach. He was just very solid throughout the bag, really, from tee to putter. J.J. Spawn was pretty darn solid across the board there, but certainly much more correlation in approach than off the tee, as you can see here, and we saw that graphically last night. Around the green, quite a bit more correlation than off the tee from last year. I'm going to tell you, this is a bit of an outlier. Off the tee has generally been fairly important, and last year it wasn't. But around the green did play some factor for the leaderboard, and then putting, just huge amounts of success. You do have a miscut from Kelly Craft. He did not do anything but putt last year. Same for Jonas Blixt. But you have, a top 5, a top 20, a runner-up, a top 5, a top 20. Putting, especially on this surface, tends to lend itself to continued success on that surface. I mean, you see there, Chesson Hadley putt very well. He's the number one putter on this surface. He did make the cut. It was a bit of a middling to clunker finish, but he does putt this surface well. Brendan Todd, very high up here. He top 10'd. Kuchar, Troy Merritt. Let's see, others that jump off very quickly to me. I think that might be the only ones that were in the top 10 in terms of putting on Poa Trivialis. But again, you see just the level of correlation. And I mean, Chesson Hadley did make the cut. So it's not that he had a terrible tournament. He did make the cut. But it was certainly worse than, Troy Merritt, Brendan Todd, and all that stuff. Okay. Just to prove that the off the tee was a bit of an outlier, we'll go to 2021 very, very quickly. Off the tee, you can see, we'll go down here to the top 22. Okay, so there's one name that's getting cut off. That's Luke List at the bottom. But you can see already just the sheer amount of positives in terms of off the tee. Only one player negative off the tee in 2021 in the top 22 players. So, again, just showing you this, reinforcing that 2022's off the tee was a bit of an outlier. But let's go ahead and move to scoring. And in Microsoft Excel last night, we saw that the highest raw number was birdies. And that looks to be the case here. Birdies gained, a massive amount in terms of birdies gained here. Shucks, I tried to keep that all highlighted, but Troy Merritt was more bogeys, but then, Hadwin, Hostler, Keegan, your top fives seem to be all in birdies gained, and then kind of the bottom half of your top tens seem to be bogeys avoided. But even so, with your top 17, none were negative in terms of birdies gained. None. And to be fair, really only one was negative and bogeys avoided. This negative 1/10 is so close to field average. I will be lenient to Zach Johnson, say he was essentially field average. Not a lot of eagles on this course, so not sure I'm going to be looking at birdies or better gained, especially since if we go back to the scorecard, you do have one decent eagle chance, a little bit over 2%, but really the rest of the eagles are pretty non-existent. You have a 600-yard par 5 that can play as a true three-shotter given wind scenarios. 604, same thing. 591, same thing. So not a lot of eagles. I think this might be one of the few times that I would use just birdies if I indeed use birdies gained. So last year looked to be birdies gained. Let's see if 2021 confirms that, or we go to a tie, essentially. So in 2021, again, your winner much higher in birdies. Now you do have bogey avoidance starting to creep up higher in terms of performance, but you still have a fair amount of birdies gained for the rest of your top 10 and even creeping into the top 15s. So I think based on the 2 years that we have, and we obviously have more, but I'm just going to go back 2 years. Your winner in 2021 led in birdies gained, fairly high in bogey avoidance as well, but led in birdies gained. I forgot to check 2022's. I imagine JJ Spawn was pretty darn close to the lead in birdies gained, if not the leader. Yeah, tied for the lead, and you see just the sheer amount of correlation here with birdies gained. Good performances in bogeys avoided still, but your winner led in birdies gains. So, on long courses that are over 7,400 yards, that is what is a long course defined by Fantasy National. On long courses, since the start of 2022, your top birdies gained players on those courses: Nate Lashley, Bo Hostler, Akshay Bhatia, JJ Spawn, your defending champion here, Sam Stevens, Chad Ramey, Chris Kirk, Nico Echeverria, Matt Kuchar, and Vincent Norman. Surprising to see Kuchar. He generally plays better on short courses, but here he is, top 10, at least in this field, for birdies gained on long courses. I still think bogey avoidance is going to be important. Whether or not I put that in the mixed condition model, I'm still kind of working through. But players that are top 10 in both birdies gained and bogeys avoided on long courses, you have Nate Lashley, Bo Hostler, and Sam Stevens. Those three are top 10 in both. Honorable mention here in Akshay Bhatia, 3rd and 19th. Nico Echeverria, 8th and 17th. Matthias Schwab, 13th and 11th. And then finally, Michael Kim, 14th and 20th. So there's just some more players that are top 20 in both birdies gained and bogeys avoided. But at least early on, and we will do this a lot tomorrow in refining the mixed condition model, but early on, looks like I'm going to be looking at birdies gained. And I might do on long courses, I might just look at birdies gained in general. And when I say in general, I just mean with no filter coming to the start of 2023. So if I do that, your top performers in birdies gained since the start of this calendar year, no filter, no long course, no easy, anything, just simply, no matter the circumstance, just birdies gained: Chris Kirk, Terrell Hatton, Akshay Bhatia, Ricky Fowler, Matt Wallace, Tyler Duncan, Taylor Montgomery, Dylan Wu, Siwoo Kim, and Nick Taylor. So there's your top birdies gained performers with no filters. All right. We'll prep this for driving statistics, driving and approach. So let's go ahead and move on over to fairways and greens and see what we can discern here. Again, the top 17 from last year. Distance is not a factor. Not really here. We saw that in Microsoft Excel last night. While distance is higher here than the average tour event, you do get a lot of run out. The wind plays a big factor to that. Distance is honestly something that I'm not going to be focused on, even though this is a long course. Instead, at least from last year, you can see greens is something that you really, really want to focus on. Only one player was negative in terms of greens gained in the top 17 last year. Quite a few negatives and high negatives in terms of fairways, good drives. I don't think fairways is going to be something that I want to take a look at. Players generally aren't too concerned with going into the rough here at the Oaks course. It's not hard to play out of. I just want to focus on the greens. Now you did have Spawn, who was pretty high up in terms of fairways gained. He had a decent amount of correlation up here. Decent, not spectacular by any means, but decent. Good drives. Again, a lot of cut makers. You do have some fair amount of solid success. Adam Hadwin's very high up here. You got some top 10s and a winner. Yeah, and your winner up here fairly high. Mixed in with some middling finishes, to be fair, but a lot more correlation than I thought there was going to be for good drives gained. And then greens, a little bit less. You have a miscut very high up here in Joseph Bramlett. J.J. Swan, this is probably the lowest he has been of those three. But again, just to reemphasize, I still think it's greens in regulation due to the fact, look at all of the players that are positive in greens who finished inside the top 17 last year. And if we move to 2021 and go to the driving and iron tab, we'll do the top 16 here. Distance a little bit more of a factor, at least for the upper end finishers in 2021. However, you see that quite a bevy of negatives lower in your top 10s and top 15s. Good drives gained and greens, both. Only one player negative. Surprisingly, it was your winner. Spieth, negative in good drives gained and greens. So let's see what we can discern here. Good drives gained. Okay, some decent amount of success here. You do have a clunker from Ryan Moore, but nothing worse than a middling T44 and better. All right, greens. You got a lot more cut makers and some higher upper leaderboard success. Evening, Joanne. There's no reason to apologize. I am grateful that you decide to catch the show whenever you are able to. So thank you for tuning in and jumping in chat. Appreciate it. No, absolutely no reason to apologize. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. May have mentioned it before you were able to jump in chat, but I could try to give you a quick synopsis. But you haven't really missed too much. We just finished the scoring metrics, and we went through the strokes gained, say off the tee approach and putting. So if you want to see that specific information, you can always catch that after the show this evening. But looking in driving and approach style metrics for the past two leaderboards, it's looking like it's greens in regulation, but good drives honestly has made a solid argument to be included or considered for the mixed condition model from both of these years. So we'll take a look at both. So only because we left off with no filters. This is with no filters just since the start of this calendar year. We'll start with greens in regulation. I think that's going to be the more important of these two factors, but we'll take a look at both. Since the start of this calendar year, your top greens in regulation gained players have been Aaron Rai, Will Gordon, Joseph Bramlett, Sepp Straka, Nate Lashley, Luke List, Tyler Duncan, Terrell Hatton, Alex Smalley, and Nick Hardy. Skipping Stefan Jaeger, he has withdrawn. So just for your information, Joanne, I've said this a couple of times, but since you just now are able to, or at least jumped into chat, 4 field changes, 4 players who have removed themselves from the field this week: Andrew Novak, Stefan Jaeger, Keith Mitchell, and Anders Albertson. So make sure you make a note of that as you prep for any wagers or DFS contests that those 4 have withdrawn. But there's your top 10 in terms of greens since the start of this calendar year. Again, not a whole lot of surprise here. Aaron Rye's been very good with his irons. He's generally a very accurate player. As you can see, number 1 in fairways, number 1 in good drives gained, and number 1 in greens. Just a very accurate player. Distance is not something he's known for. Joseph Bramlett has been very good with his approach play as of late. I'm sorry, I said Joseph Bramlett. I meant Will Gordon. My apologies. But we'll take a look at Will Gordon here. Somebody who has distance to spare. I mean, he has distance plenty, and yet he's still hitting greens and good drives. Fairways can be hit and miss, but again, with this course, fairways aren't the biggest factor, so Will Gordon might be somebody to take a look at. Luke List, one of the premier drivers or off-the-tee players, I would say on the PGA Tour, but certainly in this field. Terrell Hatton, Alex Smalley, anytime greens and regulation matter, you got to think about Alex Smalley. So there's your top greens and regulation gained players since the start of this calendar year. If we look at good drives gained, those players are Aaron Rai, Terrell Hatton, Nate Lashley, Tyler Duncan, Carson Young, Will Gordon, Ben Martin, David Lingmerth, Chris Kirk, Luke List, and Hayden Buckley. So there's your top 10 in good drives gained. Quite a bit of overlap with the greens and regulation gained, as you can see here. Really the one player that is pretty unique in that regard, David Lingmerth, 8th in good drives gained, meaning he's hitting a lot of fairways, but he's not been the best at hitting greens. He's 60th in greens gained, greens regulation gained. Now, what I will most likely do is look at these metrics on long courses. So I'm going to back this out to the start of 2022. And I'll definitely be looking at greens gained when it's long. Again, if I look at good drives gained, it'll probably be on long courses as well. Not sure if I'm going to put it in the mixed condition model, but on long courses, again defined as over 7,400 yards per Fantasy National, on long courses, your top greens in regulation gained players in the field this week: Henrik Norlander, Alex Smalley, Aaron Rai, Corey Connors, Carson Young, Nate Lashley, Marty Laird, Bryce Garnett, Hank Lebioda, and Nico Echeverria. And quite honestly, a huge amount of overlap with the good drives gained. All of those players are going to be at least honorable mention, if not in the top 10. Corey Connors, Hank Lebioda, and Nico Echeverria are the honorable mention players for the good drives gained. Just for your info, number 1 good drives gained on long courses is Satoshi Kodaira, and Emiliano Grillo is also in the top 5 for good drives gained on long courses. So there's a look at driving metrics for this week. Again, I'll be focused quite heavily on greens, although good drives gained has made a very good argument to be considered as well. Let's go ahead and move to proximity. That is certainly one that I am interested in. See if if there's any specific proximity that matters, or if my initial thought from last night being total prox is the main proximity we want to look at. And again, apologies, I'm just prepping this for when we take a look. But let's take a look at the approach shot distribution again, just very, very quickly. Majority of approach shots come from 150 to 175, but there's a pretty even amount spread out throughout the course. So it doesn't give me any reason to want to suspect one of these over the other. It's not like Bay Hill or the Farmers where 200 plus is just such a massive number, or something like Sedgefield and the John Deere where 100 to 125 or 125 to 150, these wedge courses. Nothing nothing from that graph screams that it's very, very important. So instead, we'll just look at this from a totality. Again, this is the range that has the most approach shots come from it, but looking like, at least last year, the 125 to 150 was your most correlating for upper leaderboard success. In fact, I would argue that 2 of these players are field average. You've got a negative 1.4 and a negative 2.3 across 4 rounds. So those are essentially field average. Total procs, pretty darn solid as well. Now, Bo Hostler was horrendous in total procs. Matt Jones, Siwoo Kim, pretty bad. But a couple of these other negatives are pretty close to field average. So right now, at least from last year, it's 125 to 150. But if we go through each of these ranges, total procs, okay. You do have a pretty high miscut from Brian Stewart, but a decent amount of success here, I would say. Okay. Again, fair. A couple of high miscuts. Your runner-up was very good from 75 to 100. Okay. 100 to 125. Now, JJ Spawn was very good at that range, but you had some miscuts pretty darn high up here. This is the one that was the best for the top 17. You see that you've got some missed cuts mixed in, can't talk, throughout these upper end finishes. The most prevalent, the first two or the best two from last year are miscuts. Don't see a lot there. Okay, so sorting on the individual lengths doesn't really provide a clear picture, and there might not be one, to be frank. There might not be a clear proximity. That's why I thought originally it'd be total procs. Let's take a look at 2021 and see if any of these jump off to us. Top 16 here. Now, total procs, only 2 players are negative, and really one is pretty much field average. So only one player significantly negative in total procs. That, again, is backing up my initial thought. The 175 to 200, much better. 200 plus, much better. Okay. Let's take a look at this total procs. Oh, look at this. Okay, so you've got quite a bit of cut making with some pretty good performances. 4th, 9th, 6th, 2 more top 15s, a top 25 up here. So 2021 is really backing up the total procs. Now, the winner, Jordan Spieth, wrong thing. He was solid at it, not necessarily one of the top. You have to scroll a little bit for him, but he was certainly had his fair share of positive in total procs. So I'm thinking it's probably total procs. We see the 175 and the 200 plus make some hay. Let's see if we sort on that. Okay, 175 to 200 also has a decent amount of correlation, very high when you sort on it. And then the 200 plus, yeah, okay. A little bit less, I think, than the 175 to 200. A little bit less, but not too much. Again, I'm thinking to total procs, but if you have a different feeling, feel free to put it in chat. If you think that I am seeing something that I shouldn't, or if I'm not seeing something I should, feel free to jump in chat if you disagree. But from what I am gathering, just on prior leaderboards and just kind of thinking about the course in general, total procs does seem to be the thing that we want to focus on in terms of proximity. With these greens being big, the greens are not easy to hit. So those two things in combination make it seem like you just want to look at proximity in total. Since the beginning of this calendar year, your top total procs performers have been Nate Lashley, Lucas Glover, Davis Riley, Scott Piercy, Satoshi Kodaira, Ryan Armour, Kevin Roy, Eric Cole, Doc Redmond, Sam Stevens, and Terrell Hatton. A lot of names keep overlapping here. Piercy's been up there quite a bit. Kodaira, Sam Stevens, who I've been very, very high on recently. And hopefully you followed me at the Corrales, where Sam Stevens really performed well for you if you took him. Nate Lashley's been up here a lot on these metrics that we seem to be focusing on for the Oaks course this week. So there's a look at your top total procs. I don't use a filter generally on total procs just because proximity is proximity regardless of whether you're on a short course, long course, easy. Sometimes I might look at it if it's easy or difficult, but I'm not doing anything with that filter this week, so I'm just going to look at total procs in that regard. All right, we'll prep for the pars 3s, 4s, and 5s. Running a little bit over, so I'm going to try to get through this because quite a bit in Excel that I still want to cover. All right, so par 3s. Your winner was negative in those last year. But again, just like in terms of off the tee, I think this is a bit of an outlier in terms of in the negative, or a low outlier. Par 3s generally are pretty important here, and I will remind you of that as you progress up the leaderboard. Now, in the top 10s, not very important, but as you progress up the leaderboard, the par 3s start to make some gains, and for your winners, they actually pass the par 4s. So I don't think it is correct to completely ignore par 3s. Let's see. If there was a range, it was the 225 plus last year, where there is one solid 225 plus. However, in the raw data last night, I believe it was the 175 to 200 that was the highest, or had the highest percentage for these par 3s here. So total par 3s, decent bit of correlation here. If we look at specific numbers, 2.2, decent amount of correlation here, I guess. 3.9, you've got some good finishes, but you also have a couple of miscuts high. 2.4, and not very much correlation with all these miscuts high up here. And a 2.3, so, but it does have the best correlation. So your highest number, yes, was in the 175 to 200, but the most correlation was in the 225 plus. And if we look at 2021's very quickly, we'll see if we can get the same results here. Like 200, 225 that year was very strong. 175 to 200, very strong. All right. Again, solid run of cut making, although look at the performances here for some of these players in terms of total par 3s. 4th, 6th, runner-up, 3rd, top 15. Pretty important. We have a 3.2, but a miscut. So again, 150 to 175 doesn't seem to be all that important. A 4.0 and some decent correlation. A 1.1. In fact, the only time a par 3 measured to 200 to 225 was when a player made the cut. So that explains why you had a lot of this up here. Okay. And then 225 plus. Yeah, again, you have a couple of high miscuts. I think it's the 175 to 200. If we're going to focus on a range, I think it's the 175 to 200. So, in general, your top par 3 performers in 2023 have been Ricky Fowler, Sam Ryder, Ben Griffin, Siwoo Kim, Ben Taylor, Doc Redman, Hank Lebioda, Paul Haley, Pearson Coody, and Brendan Todd. Looking at the specific range here at the Oaks, that seems to be the most important. Ricky Fowler's second, so he's top 10 in both. Ben Griffin, top 10 in both. You got Ben Taylor, number 1 in the specific length, top 5 in total par 3s. Brendan Todd, 5th and 10th. Okay. Augusto Nunez would be an honorable mention. 6th in the length, top 20 in total. JJ Spawn, your defending champion, 7th and 21st. So there's a look at par 3 performance. Again, not the most important, with the par 5s being so dominant in terms of importance here, but I still think we're going to have some par 3 look in the mixed condition model. Let's go to par 4s. Last night, at least in Microsoft Excel, it showed that the 350 to 4 was the most important. But the majority of holes come from, data-wise, it was 450 to 5 and a little bit of the 400 450, although the majority of your par 4s fall kind of in this 350 to 4 range. So, top 17. No real range that jumps out. You have a fair bit of negatives in terms of every single one of these ranges, it does look like just total par fours. Yeah, look at that. Fourth, second, first. Top 15, a middling for Putnam, and then a runner-up in a top 15. So very, very strong in terms of par fours. If we look at specific ranges, like 354 doesn't have much at all, although your winner was very high in it, but still didn't lead. 400, 450 is a 4.9. You have a good run of cut making, but again, not solid, not like the just total par fours. And then 450 to 5 is a 6.7. This has been the strongest so far of the individual ranges. Let's see if 2021 matches that. Top 16 due to ties. Nobody negative in terms of par fours, so backing that up again. 350 to 4. A lot more correlation in 2021. You have a 5.9 again. Look at this solid correlation here in the 400 450. 6th, 2nd, 6th, 1st, and a clunker from Scotty Scheffler. 450 to 5. Oh yeah. So looking like it's 450 to 500, even though surprisingly it has 4 of the par fours. So not the most numerous in terms of length. So again, 454 can easily come down into under 450. Now 481 is pretty solidly entrenched there in the 450 to 5, and it is the number 1 most difficult hole. So if you're getting par there, that seems like you're gaining ground. 474, pretty solidly entrenched in the 450 to 5. 464, okay, so looking at this, it starts to make a little bit more sense. You got the most difficult, second most difficult, third most difficult, and fourth most difficult. The four most difficult holes on this course are the 450 to 5s. So if you're getting par there, or even a birdie, you're making up a lot of ground. So now looking or connecting those two dots starts to make a whole lot of sense. Evening, Pete. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully your week has started off well. You are ready for some Valero, and we are going to attempt to add to our bankroll before the Masters. But thanks again for jumping in chat. So looking at par fours, I think it's still correct to look at total par fours. So your top par 4 performers since the start of this calendar year: Chris Kirk, Thomas Detry, Akshay Bhatia, Nick Taylor, Ben Martin, Terrell Hatton, Ben Griffin, Luke List, Taylor Montgomery, and Siwoo Kim. Again, skipping Keith Mitchell, he is withdrawn. So P, for your information, in case, again, I would ask and recommend you go back and check out the beginning portion of the show, but just very quickly for your information, Andrew Novak, Stefan Jaeger, Keith Mitchell, and Anders Albertson have withdrawn. So make a note of that in your research and in your considerations early on in your week. Those 4 players have withdrawn that I've seen. I haven't checked in the past 3-ish hours or so there might be more, but those 4 I know have. But there's your top par 4 performers. Let's take a look at 450 to 500 par 4s, as at least by the leaderboards looked like it was the most important range. Killer Keith, rip. Well, yeah, this is not a very strong field, and it got a little bit weaker with Keith withdrawing. But your top long par 4 performers this calendar year, have been Sam Ryder, Sepp Straka, Hayden Buckley, Nick Taylor, Akshay Bhatia, Thomas Detry, Carson Young, Siwoo Kim, Ben Griffin, and Taylor Pendrith. So there are the players that I'm probably going to give a little bit of an extra boost early on in my considerations for lineups and DFS and whatnot. Of course, everything else being equal with me not looking at the prices yet. All right, and then finally, let's take a look at par 5s, and then we'll head to Microsoft Excel very, very quickly. Prep this for par 5s. Par 5s consistently throughout the leaderboard. 10s, your top 10s, your top 5s, and your winners. Par 5s is just some of your best scoring chances here with the very long par 5s that are here at the Oaks. You gotta be able to get your birdies on those courses, or on those holes. So let's see, this is last year's leaderboard. We'll see if there's a specific range that seems to matter. Again, par 5, only one player negative. Looks fairly even. Maybe the 600 to 650 had more players positive in it. Your top in this range was a 5.8, but that's some pretty strong correlation right there. That's some very strong correlation. And then a 4.7 and less. So really, okay, the 550 to 6 is certainly the leader for after 1 year of checking the leaderboard. We'll do 2021 in the par 5s. Again, the top 16 just due to ties. Few more players negative. Actually, only just 2. And one was just very bad that week. Gary Woodland was okay. Specific range, again, it seems like more are positive in the 550 to 6. So you got a 5.8, and your winner led in that range with some pretty good correlation. Now, you do have some miscuts a little bit higher up, but pretty strong when your winner leads a metric or category. And then a 4.5, a little bit less correlation. So, yeah, looking like the 550 to 6s. Now, you do have a 602, which easily can come down below 600. 604 easily can come down below 600. Now, 553 can go into the 500 to 550, but it very rarely does. And then 591 in that range could go up. Okay, so yeah, maybe it is just the 550 to 6s that we look at. So your top par 5 performers, I'm just going to look at 550 to 6, just based on what we saw. Your top performers at par 5s from that range: Dylan Fratelli, Patton Kizzire, Ryan Fox, Adam Long, Dylan Wu, Harry Higgs, Francesco Molinari, Nick Taylor, Kevin Streelman, Robbie Shelton, Patrick Rodgers, and Chris Stroud. If you want to take a quick gander at total par 5s, Dylan Fratelli, Patton Kizzire, Dylan Wu, Chris Stroud, Matt Kuchar, all of those players are in the top 10 for total par 5s that are also very good at the specific length. Ryan Palmer would probably be an honorable mention. Terrell Hatton would probably be an honorable mention as well. Adam Long, too. To be fair to Adam Long, would be an honorable mention. All right, that's what we have for Fantasy National in terms of the Data Dive Show. Let's quickly move to Microsoft Excel. First thing we're going to look at, let's recap quickly on the specific metrics here at the Oaks course. Talked about it when we were going through the strokes gained. You see that off the tee was a pretty big outlier last year in terms of low. Didn't matter much last year, and it normally does. So we're going to be looking at strokes gained off the tee. And it's generally about 10% more important than the average full field course. So definitely looking at off the tee. It was low in terms of approach as well. And the approach is pretty darn close to full field course average already. Now, the around the green does look like it has a lot of weight, and this is a low outlier. I am just not a believer that around the green is going to matter much this week. And if it does, that is probably where I'm going to be weak in the mixed condition model. I am more focused on the ball strikers this week. I think this is going to be a ball striking preferred or favored course. And then putting, I will do what I did for the match play last week in the mixed condition model, and I covered it earlier in the evening or in the show. I will take a look at all of the Poa Trivialis courses back to 2021, Valero, TBC Sawgrass of Players, Amex, Stadium Course, TBC Scottsdale Waste Management, and Innisbrook the Valspar. Those 5 courses. And putting generally seems to be pretty darn important. I know it says 3% less, but putting form on Poa Trivialis seems to be a thing. Again, quickly going through some of this. Distance, not really a big factor. Good drives gained, we saw that it was at least surprising to me. Something that looked like it was pretty important on past leaderboards. it's roughly full field course average. Nothing really stands out. Now, greens is something I'm going to be focused on pretty heavily, and it's showing that it's a little bit less as well, but you can't argue with the correlation that we saw in the prior leaderboards. So I'm still undecided, I should say, about good drives gained, but I'll definitely be looking at some greens. Hence my belief in ball striking this week. Scoring, it's honestly looking like the bogeys were more important, but that's against full field courses. When you look at the raw numbers, it is the birdies gained. So we'll look at birdies gained. Yes, that might be a bit of a high outlier, but it's matched by an equidistant low outlier. So, okay. Par 3s. 2021 was a bit of an outlier. Well, not really. It's been pretty hit and miss for par 3s, but again, with 175 to 200, look at your 175 to 200s are making up more than half of your totality in strokes gained par 3s, and that's a low outlier. If we look at this, 40% in terms of 175 to 200 par 3s. I think that is where I'm going to put all of my focus in the par 3s this week. The numbers just seem to be backing that up. The 150 to 175 is not really all that much of a big deal. Neither are the two longer ones. And while each of these ranges do have one par 3 that measure to this on the scorecard, the 150 to 175 I believe is at like 171. So it can easily come up to here. And the 200 to 225 I believe is at 204. So it can easily come down to here. I'm seeing 175 to 200 as the main focal point for par 3s. Par 4s, again, last year, pretty low outlier. And look at there, 450 to 5 was the most important. Although that is a very high outlier. Very, very high outlier. Still, though, look, 400 to 450, still not all that important compared to other full field courses. I don't know. I'm thinking, the more I'm thinking about it, the more it might just be totality in par 4s. Maybe 450 to 500, 5%, maybe. But I'll be going through that tomorrow over on Twitch in the morning. Par 5s, we saw that it was the 550 to 6s. Look, 550 to 6 is making up double of the 600 to 650. I'm basically ignoring this value. There was only 1 year in which a par 5 measured less than 550. So, looks pretty darn convincing that the 550 to 6 is where we want to look for the par 5s. And then proximity with this very low outlier, I think is going to be where we want to put all our focus into proximity. Especially with the low outlier, this number will just go up. There are some big numbers here in terms of against other full field courses. I just don't feel very comfortable after seeing the previous two leaderboards on any of these specific ranges. However, if you do, then make a note of that and feel free to put it in the comments of the video or shoot me a message on social media if you think that I'm overlooking something with proximity. But I think it's prox total. All right. Before we go to the early look file, let's go and see how my mixed condition model performed last year here at the Valero. Let's see. Looking at my top 20, I only had 4 missed cuts. So that's very promising. The winner was 12th, and and he was in 6,700. This to me screams like it is a pretty darn successful mixed condition model. Now, my number 1 player had a clunker of a made cut. That's fair. Hideki withdrew. Rory missed the cut. Alex Smalley, which again makes a lot of sense because I was focusing on greens here on long courses, which I'm probably going to do again this year. He missed the cut. But overall, this seems pretty darn solid. I've got several top 10s. Again, the winner, who was a 6K, not terribly highly owned. Siwoo was a top 15. I consider this pretty darn successful. To be honest, I think that's a pretty successful mixed condition model. I will sort this on the leaderboard. But let's take a look at the metrics that I looked at. 20% strokes gain approach. Okay, probably a little bit heavy. Probably back that down to 15%. But again, the emphasis on ball striking, and that's what I'm going to be doing again this year. And it turned out to be a pretty successful mixed condition model. 15% par 4s does seem a bit heavy, especially since they are, for your winners, the least important of the holes by par. 10% par 5s, probably what I'm thinking early on, I'm probably going to reverse these. Put 15% in par 5s, 10% in par 4s. At least that's an early guess. 10% that I'm getting back, I did look at performance on long courses. 10% birdies gained on long courses, like we've talked about tonight. Think that's going to be another or a straight bring over from last year's. Same for the greens on long courses. Now, I did look at bogeys as well. 5% on long courses, and then the par 3s, 5%. So a lot of the same metrics that we've been talking about. Now, definitely going to be moving some percentages around, but a lot of these same metrics, and it turned a pretty successful mixed condition model. So if we want to see how predictive these were, we're going to average, and we'll go to the top 28 here, just because of ties. We had so many people tied for 18th. So we'll go to the top 28 players, and let's see how predictive these were. And I'll zoom in and bring it over for you. Okay. Again, anything in the 40s is very strong. Oh gosh, what was that? 50 to 53, 54 is pretty average. And looking like none of these actually are fairly predictive, with the exception of par 3s, which I only had 5% in, which is a little bit surprising. How many players were in the field last year? 142? Quite heavy. That's quite a lot. So maybe these numbers need to be adjusted up a little bit, but still. Oh, okay, sorry. I did not see the par 5. 45. So par 4s were very predictive last year in terms of success. Very predictive. Again, the aforementioned par 3s, just a little bit off your screen. The long courses was okay. It was the third best of the metrics that I used, but still pretty middling. Everything else was in the 60s in terms of predictive for players who were going to perform well. It was just in these par 4s, and even then, your winner was, at least coming into this tournament, very bad at them. But otherwise, it was pretty solid for par 4s. Now, you did have some pretty solid performances in iron play from a few players. Mito, Keegan, Woodland, Schwab. You're getting hurt quite a bit by these guys that were in the deep red. Okay. Let's see. Birdies gained. About the same as bogeys avoided in predictive. Okay. Birdies looked like it was a bit more hit and miss. You know, whether the guys were very good or very bad versus the bogeys were maybe a little bit more consistent, I guess. Maybe not. All right. Anyway, that is how my mixed condition model performed last year, how predictive it was, and I'm a bit surprised it didn't appear to be all that predictive. Being honest, it didn't appear to be all that predictive in terms of the players that were playing or, you know, very high in these stats, but yet that was a pretty darn good mixed condition model. So we'll see how it performs this year using a whole lot of these same metrics, moving some percentages around, but a lot of these same metrics and the same exact stuff in these two categories, birdies, gaining, greens on long courses. All right, we're going to end the show with the early look file. Again, this is players specifically at the Valero in the past, usually 5 iterations. This is 4 iterations, only because 2020 was canceled. And what they've performed well at, and we want to see who has been the best at some of these metrics. I'm just going to skip the approach and off the tee, even though I'm putting such an emphasis on it this week. Let's see who the best putters have been at the Valero the past 4 years. Let's see. Troy Merritt, been very good. Doc Redman, only 2 events. Richie Wierenski's 3 for 3 with no missed cuts. Been very good on these greens. There's Chesson Hadley, the number 1 putter on Poa Trivialis in the field this week. Peter Malnati's been very good on this surface. Saying you'll know, not very awe-inspiring finishes, but 2 for 2. Andrew Putnam. There's Matt Kuchar, very, very solid here at the Valero. Jimmy Walker, a former champion here, I believe in 2015. Charlie Hoffman's been very good here, 2 runner-ups. So there's your look at the top putters here in the past 4 years at the Oaks course. We move to, let's go to greens. I think that's going to be a pretty big factor this week. Your top greens and regulation gained players past 4 years. Look at that. 2019 winner, Corey Connors. Pat Gazire, Aaron Ryan's only 1 time. Ryan Moore, 3 for 3. Very high in the greens gained. Lucas Glover, 3 for 3. Chris Kirk. Ryan Palmer. I thought he would have played this a little bit better, but he's only been 2 for 4. Texas native. Adam Long has not played this very well, but been good on the greens. There's Streelman, who's been very good at this tournament. Martin Laird's been very good at this tournament. Been doing it in greens. All right. I'm going to skip birdies and the bogeys. I kind of want to look at some specific lengths of holes. So par 3s, 175 to 2. Take a look at that. Look here, some of your best players in the past 4 years here. Kevin Streelman, Lucas Glover, Corey Connors, Charlie Hoffman, Jimmy Walker, Matt Kuchar. Yeah, I think 175 to 200 is going to be the par 3 metric to look at this year, or this week. Siwoo Kim. Dylan Fratelli has been very good at this tournament. 450 to 5 par 4s. Actually, I'm just going to do par 4s in general. I'm not as confident in the 450 to 5s, but par 4s in general, well, too bad. Killer Keith is out. Kevin Streelman again. Ryan Moore. Aaron Baddeley. This is another reason why I was very successful last year. Aaron Baddeley was the minimum price, $6,000. He was one of the few 6Ks that paid off in terms of recommendations for me last year. I think I'm a little better at 6K recommendations this year, but Aaron Baddeley has never missed the cut here at the Valero. Never. He's never missed the cut. So take a long look at Aaron Baddeley this week. I'm sure he'll be a little bit more expensive than $6,000, but he's never missed the cut here. Corey Connors. And I'm saying he's never missed the cut in his career. Not even just the past 4 years. He's never missed the cut in his career at the Valero. So take that what you will. Corey Connors, Chris Kirk, Siwoo, Charlie Hoffman, Matt Kuchar, Party Marty, Troy Merritt, all of these guys. And look at the just sheer amount of success in terms of the 450 to 5s. Because you've got a few negatives up here for the 400 to 450 and even the 350 to 4s. You've got some negatives. But all of these players are positive in 450 to 500 yard par 4s here at the Valero. So that gives me a little bit more confidence going into making my mixed condition model that I'll probably have about 5% in the 450 to 5 par 4s. 2 more that I want to look at. Let's look at the 550 to 6 par 5s and then total procs. I think that'll be it for the evening. So par 5s, 550 to 6. Matthias Schwab only 1 time. Kevin Twaits only twice. Nate Lashley, he popped on a whole lot of these metrics on the evening, but yet he has missed the cut 2 of his 3 tries here. Kevin Chappell's played well here, and he's a former champion. Quite a few years back, but he is a former champion here. Ryan Moore again, Dylan Fratelli, Corey Connors, Lucas Glover. Trey Mullinax, 2 for 3. Now, nothing inspiring in terms of average finish, but 2 for 3. Martin Laird, Charlie Hoffman, Ricky. Okay, all right. Lastly, let's take a look at proximity. And again, for anyone who might have missed the explanation or just now tuning in or whatnot, this is performance specifically at TPC San Antonio, the Oaks course, in the past 4 years. Lucas Glover, Corey Connors, Brian Stewart, pretty good at total procs, although he hasn't played it the best. Kuchar, Chappell, former champion, Streelman, Kirk. Stanley, a little bit less success, but still 2 for 3. Then you get some of these players who have only played it once, but were pretty good. All right. So that is what I have for you in terms of the Data Dive show this evening. I will bring this back to the best average finish for your perusal. There you go. That's what I have for you in terms of the Data Dive show this evening. I want to thank you for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel. Joanne and P for jumping in chat. Always appreciative. Never, ever apologize for jumping in late or anything like that. I'm grateful that you all are willing to take some time out of your evening to watch, watch my analysis and take my analysis to whatever ends that you use it for in your wagers and DFS contests. So thank you for that. And thanks to everyone out there who tunes in and watches, supports the channel, subscribes. Always appreciative. Reminder that I will be live tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. over on Twitch instead of this morning. I had some phone calls that I had to make. So tomorrow morning I will be live, and I'll be working on my mixed condition model. So I'll give you a peek behind the curtain, if you will, on how I make my mixed condition models, or at least the thought process I go in to making my mixed condition models. And with baseball only 3 days away, I'll probably be doing some baseball stuff as well. So if you're interested in that, drop by tomorrow over on Twitch, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Thanks again for all the support. Love what I do, and I wouldn't be able to do it without you all tuning in and listening. So for all of the wagers that you've made so far this week for the Valero Texas Open, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Valero Texas Open, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.